The 20th century is arguably one of the most criminal on an unprecedented scale, the century of the two world wars, the Holocaust, and the rise of Nazism and fascism. Before that, a number of dictators left their mark in claiming the lives of millions of people, slaughtered and killed, etching their names in history along with the blood of their victims. Competing for the list of the deadliest rulers are dictatorial leaders such as Genghis Khan, Adolf Hitler, and Joseph Stalin. But the list also includes soldiers, snipers and serial killers, such as Simo Haiha, who has become one of the deadliest snipers in the world by claiming hundreds of lives in just days, as well as Colombian assassin Luis Garavito. Here are the numbers of victims of dictatorial leaders who killed millions of people, in order from the least lethal to the most. Adolf Hitler. His reputation is worse than his actual crimes. Most of you may think that the answer is Nazi leader Adolf Hitler or Soviet dictator Joseph Stalin, whose era saw millions killed, as a direct result of their policies. However, Hitler's death toll does not exceed 17 million, while some consider it to have reached 27 million, divided as follows: 15 million Soviets, 6 million Jews in the Holocaust plus 6 million Germans killed in Germany's wars. Other references indicate that the Nazi policy of exterminating Jews and other groups resulted in the deaths of only 11 million people. Although the overall death toll from the war itself far exceeds this figure. During the first 3 years of World War II, Hitler controlled most of the European continent, with the exception of Britain, and occupied a third of the Soviet Union. The Soviets were his biggest victims, until they beat him in the Battle of Stalingrad, which lasted for months, after which they entered Berlin. This prompted the Führer to commit suicide. More. Joseph Stalin. 1830 victims per day. Hitler is often remembered as the greatest dictator, who posed a threat to humanity in the 20th century. But comparing the numbers of Hitler and Stalin's victims, for example, Stalin far surpasses his comrade Hitler. Figures vary from historian to historian when it comes to Stalin, but a number of historians, referred to as moderates, say he killed some 40 million during his 30 years in power. In simple terms, from the above figures, 2 million people were killed every year under Stalin, or 40,000 every week. At the very least, if we consider that he killed only 20 million, as some references suggest, the number of people killed per day would be 1,830. Not only did these millions die during World War II, but there was ethnic cleansing that lasted for long periods and almost permanently, in addition to expulsions, forced displacement and labor camps in Siberia, to which his opponents were sent and died within days. In 1937, Stalin promulgated the Anti-Terror Act, which approved the death penalty for those found guilty of terrorism. This law that also killed millions, especially since it was forbidden for the defendants to attend a defense lawyer. According to the Georgian historian Roy Alexandrovich Medvedev, 20 million were victims of Stalin's whims of irresponsible murder, forced displacement, political purges and labor camps, and another 20 million were victims of World War II by the Soviets. But the Russian writer Alexander Solzhenitsyn, for example, points out that Stalin's death toll already reaches 60 million. But most academics and historians estimate between 30 and 40 million victims. 20 million are Stalin's victims in World War II only. Genghis Khan. 40 million victims. Mao Zedong may have killed the largest number of people in history, but there are some other leaders with similar numbers, including Genghis Khan. Even if you are not familiar with the stories and mysteries of history, you must know that the name of the Mughal leader Genghis Khan is primarily associated with bloodshed, until it is said that he killed the inhabitants of an entire city, numbering nearly 2 million people, in just 1 hour, then cut off their heads and stacked their skulls on top of each other in the form of a pyramid. The Mongol emperor and his sons succeeded in establishing the largest continuous land empire in human history, during his reign, which lasted from 1206 to 1227. The Mongols relied more on violence than diplomacy in the conquest of territory. The monstrous Mongol armies terrified the whole world when they began their bloody journey in the 13th century, from East Asia in China to the Abbasid Caliphate. But the tragedy was complete in Muslim countries when, by their commander Hulagu, these armies overran the Abbasid capital Baghdad and killed Caliph al-Musta'sim Billah in 1258. Medieval censuses suggest that China lost tens of millions of people under Khan. According to the American website ATI, Genghis Khan's Mongol forces wiped out 11% of the world's population at the time. Although it is difficult to determine the true death toll under his rule, historians estimate that about 40 million people died within his expanding empire. This makes Genghis Khan one of the deadliest killers in world history, especially since such a staggering number of victims occurred in no more than 20 years. Other leaders have a bad reputation, though their death toll is much lower, though equally horrific. Mao Zedong, between 78 and 80 million victims. The truth is that the most criminal leader of the 20th century is Mao Zedong, the Chinese dictator who ruled for 27 years and is considered the godfather of the new China. Tong led the Chinese Revolution and was able to count on the communist camp at the time, and not only that, but Mao developed another type of communism called Maoism, after him. The authors of Mao Zedong, the unknown story, one of whom was a soldier of Mao's Red Guard, run away and assert that Mao did not believe in communism, but was an opportunist and leaned towards communism when it would bring him to power, with the support of the Soviet Union, even though he had joined China's communist enemies, nationalists, earlier. On his way to power, Mao entered a civil war that he won, becoming the undisputed head of the Communist Party, the President of the People's Republic of China, and the head of the military commission that commands the army. This was 1949. In 1958, Mao Zedong launched the Great Leap Forward campaign, when he began mobilizing the Chinese workforce, hoping to make China a competitor on the world stage. But his harsh policies have forced millions from their homes, subjected civilians to sanctions, and provoked famines in the country. People were subjected to terrible disciplines for the most minor abuses during that period, forced to work regardless of the circumstances, and subjected to brutal and deliberate starvation. Historian Frank de Coutier says that between 2 and 3 million people have been tortured or killed for trivial reasons. 3 million people killed for trivial reasons in the Mao era. In a 2016 text for History Today, de Coutier gave an example of Mao's brutality during that era, writing, "When a boy stole a handful of grain in Hunan village, the village mayor forced the boy's father to bury him alive, and the father died in grief days later." De Coutier estimates that the number of people who died because of Mao's policies was, at least 45 million between 1958 and 1962 alone. But the number could reach 78 or 80 million people, which means that Mao Zedong killed the largest number of people in history, especially since he has several positions that cannot be described as rational. In 1966 he launched what he called the Cultural Revolution, but it was really an attempt to get rid of all his opponents in the Communist Party. The Red Guard, made up mostly of students, was in Mao's hands, and his wife Jiang Qing, along with 3 other leaders, led the Cultural Revolution. The Cultural Revolution lasted about 7 years, during which nearly 1 million Chinese were killed. The Red Guards would kill university professors, intellectuals, anyone suspected of disagreeing with the commander's decisions, or anyone who did not memorize Mao's Red Book. In one of Mao Zedong's shifts, he led a campaign to eradicate what he called the 4 pests: sparrows, flies, mosquitoes, and mice. The government began catching insects and mice and killing birds, due to China's locust season. The campaign was on the sparrows because they eat agricultural grains, forgetting that they also eat insects, so Mao launched a campaign that caused a famine that killed 20 million Chinese, before the government was finally forced to stop the campaign on the birds. Meanwhile, rulers such as King Leopold II of Belgium saw between 8 million and 11 million people killed during his rule, while Cambodian leader Pol Pot estimated it between 1.5 million and 2 million. So, the answer to the question of, who killed the largest number of people in history, when we talk about dictatorial leaders is clear, but it won't be as clear when we talk about soldiers or snipers and serial killers. Simo Haiha, the sniper who killed 505 soldiers in just 98 days. Simo Haiha is the deadliest sniper in history, having killed at least 505 people in just 98 days during the 1939–1940 Winter War between Finland and the Soviet Union. Haiha was born in December 1905, in the village of Kiskinen, then located in the old Finnish region of Karelia, and is now a Russian region. He was a farmer and enjoyed many hobbies, including skiing, hunting, and archery. In the Winter War, Haiha fought with Finland against the Soviet Union in what is historically called the Winter War. When he was 33 years old, and served with the Finnish army 98 out of 105 days. The war lasted 105 days, but Haiha did not see its end, as he was injured and hospitalized during the last week of it. During the 98-day period of terror he spread to his enemies, he did not see or hear. He operated and targeted Soviet soldiers with deadly precision, so much so that he once killed 25 men in one day. Simo Haiha, with his unique personality and constant training, was a nightmare for Soviet troops in the Finnish winter forests, until he was wounded on March 6, 1940, in the forests of Ulisma in the Kola region. A bullet hit him during a Soviet attack, and he fell into a coma from which he only woke up a week later, during which the armistice between the two countries was signed. After his injury, Haiha suffered from permanent facial deformity and near-constant pain for many years. Haiha was a nightmare for Soviet troops in the Finnish winter forests. Luis Garavito serial killer claimed 400 victims in 2 years. Luis Garavito is considered one of those deadliest killers in modern history, just to satisfy his sick instincts. The Colombian serial killer is believed to have been the world's deadliest killer, raping, torturing and killing between 200 and 400 boys and teenagers aged between 6 and 16 between 1992 and 1999. Garavito has officially admitted to killing 140 children. While Pedro Lopez, another Colombian serial killer, is believed to have been one of the deadliest killers in history as well. Just after Garavito, he became known as the Andes Monster, and may have killed up to 300 young girls. The British newspaper The Sun reported that he was convicted of killing 110 girls, and later confessed to killing 240 other girls. Shockingly, the most famous serial killers in American history, such as Ted Bundy and Jeffrey Dahmer, killed only a small percentage of the victims at the hands of Garavito and Lopez.